He had a very clear conception of how he had done it. He was also convinced he could repeat the feat again. He could almost tell what stocks would do. If after an 8-point, that's an $8 advance, a stock dropped back 4 points, that's $4, he did not become alarmed. He expected it to do just that. He slowly started to imagine he was a Napoleon of finance. After all, he reasoned to himself, rather smugly, how many people could do what he had done? The truth was that as his pocket had strengthened, his head had weakened. He'd grown overconfident. This is the most dangerous state of mind the stock investor can develop in the stock market. It was not long before he received a bitter lesson. The market always hands out to those who think they can carelessly master it. Possessing what he believed to be a foolproof system, he felt that if he moved nearer to the market, nothing could stop him from making a fortune each day. As the scene of his future triumphs, he chose the uptown office of one of his brokers. He was fascinated by his first visit to the office. There was an air of action, bustle, and noise. And by the way, W.D. Gann actually had an office in his brokerage as well. In a few days of trading, he threw everything he'd learned from the past 6 years overboard. He did everything he had trained himself not to. He talked to brokers. He listened to rumors. He obsessively watched the ticker. It was as if the get-rich-quick demon had gotten hold of him. He completely lost his clear perspective he had so carefully built up. Step by step, he led himself along a path where he began to lose his skill. The first thing that deserted him was his sixth sense. He didn't feel anything. All he could see was a jungle of stocks running up and down without rhyme or reason. Then his independence went. He gradually abandoned his system and adopted the attitudes of others. He was following the crowd. His reason forsake him, and emotion took over completely. Instead of being the lone wolf, he became a confused, excited lamb milling around with others, waiting to be clipped. It was impossible for him to say no when everybody around him was saying yes. He got scared when they got scared. He became hopeful when they were hopeful. Nothing like this, not even in his first novice years, had ever happened to him. He lost all his skill and control. Everything he touched went wrong. The careful system he had built up collapsed around him. He put in dozens of contradictory orders. He bought stocks at 55. They went back to 51. He hung on. Stop loss, that was the first thing he threw away. Patience, judgment, he had none. Boxes, he forgot about them. He bought at the top. As soon as he bought, the stock started to drop. He became frightened and he sold at the bottom. As soon as he sold, the stock started to rise. He became greedy. He bought at the top. He developed a tremendous frustration. Instead of blaming his own stupidity, he invented different reasons for his failures. He started to believe in they. They were selling me dear. They were buying stock from me cheap. He could not, of course, tell anyone who they were, but that didn't stop him from believing in them. Fighting them, these gray ghosts in the back of his mind, made him reckless. He became stubborn. Even though stocks went on beating him, each time they hit him, he just wiped off the blood and came back for more. He kept telling himself that he was more than $500,000 ahead of the market, and therefore this could not possibly be happening to him. How wrong he was. It was a period of complete disaster. He lost $100,000 in a few weeks. He could still hardly believe it. Now he knows that it was caused by egotism, leading to vanity, leading to overconfidence. This in turn led to disaster. It was not the market that beat him. It was his own unreasoning instincts and uncontrolled emotions. He bought stocks and sold them a few hours later. He knew that if he bought and sold on the same day, he was permitted to operate with as little as 25% margin in his account. Instead of profiting from this, he succeeded in losing several $1,000s each time. Day trading results based on a Taiwan study indicate that investors have little hope. He rides through more than 10 consecutive losing trades. At the end of the day, he loses nearly $100,000. Nicolas Darvas writes, "Do you wonder after this melancholy table why I shuddered whenever I looked at stocks? He was reading too much. He was trying to do too much." This is why he rapidly reached the stage where he could read the figures on the stock market quotations, but they no longer told him anything. His mind had become blurred. The last phase really frightened him. He felt like a drunk who loses touch with reality and cannot understand why. Modern finance literature shows an inverse relationship between portfolio turnover and returns. This means that the more trades you make, the less you should expect to profit. He suddenly realized something. There was no easy solution to the problem. For a long time, he was baffled. Then, one day, as he sat in the Plaza Hotel, afraid to make a telephone call, he suddenly realized something. When he was abroad, he visited no trading rooms, talked to no one, received no telephone calls, watched no ticker. The solution was whispering to him, but at first he could not credit it. It was so surprising, so simple, yet so extraordinary that he could hardly believe it. It was his ears were his enemy. When he was traveling abroad, he'd been able to assess the market, or rather the few stocks in which he was interested, calmly, neutrally, without interruption or rumor, completely without emotion or ego. He had operated on the basis of his telegram, which gave him perspective. It showed him the way that stocks were behaving. There were no other influences because he did not see or hear anything else. In New York, there were interruptions, rumors, panics, contradictory information, all flowing to his ear. As a result of this, his emotions became involved with the stocks, and the cold, clinical approach was gone. He reviewed the situation and got rid of every stock except for Universal Controls and Thiokol. These were behaving well, and he left them alone. He gave instructions to his brokers to never telephone or give him information of any sort on any pretext whatsoever. The only communication he wanted from them and from Wall Street was his usual daily telegram. He wandered around Paris in a daze, his head still spinning with blurred, meaningless columns of stock market quotations. His daily telegrams arrived. They still did not make much sense to him. He had completely lost his touch. He felt like a man who has had a terrible accident and feels he will never be well again. He was thoroughly demoralized. He impatiently waited for the next day's cable. When he received it, there was no doubt. The figures were clearer and more familiar. As though a veil had been lifted, once again images started to form before his eyes, giving him some view of the stock's future. Gradually, like an invalid, he began to regain his confidence. He recovered enough courage to try to approach the market again. He decided as a permanent rule that he would never visit a brokerage office again. His new rules became as follows. Rule number 1, never visit a brokerage. Rule number 2, brokers must be prohibited from picking up a telephone and calling him. Rule number 3, he must have quotations by cable and nothing else. Rule number 4, his brokers must never quote any stock to him except the ones he asked for. Rule number 5, they must not tell him about any new stocks, as that would immediately come into the rumor class. These rules apply even if he is in a New York hotel. In this way, he places Wall Street thousands of miles away from him. He would pick himself up as he always had. When he saw one that interested him and seemed to be preparing for a rise, he would ask for quotations. He would only ask for one new quotation at a time. Then, as he did before, he would study it carefully before deciding if it was worth going into. He was like a man who had survived a plane crash and knows he must fly again immediately or lose his nerve. Darvas knew only one way of making this method foolproof. He booked himself on a plane back to New York.